Morning. Okay, so today's the first day of a proper journey in the car. All we've really been able to do is run around locally recently because of the lockdown. But today I've got to go into the office, which is a place called Ruddington in Nottingham. So it's going to be an interesting one today because we'll be able to have a look at the mileage on the car and also see how far we can get, whether we can get there and back. I'm pretty sure we can. Good news is we've got chargers at work should I need to use them. But let's have a look at where we're starting from. Okay, so we've got 178 miles on the clock and supposedly got 190 miles of charge. I'm sure we'll lose a bit of that because I've got to warm up the cabin. But let's see what we've got when we get to Ruddington. Just thought I'd give you a bit of a progress report because I'm due to be joining Motorway shortly and I'm expecting it'll use range quite significantly, but just thought I'd mention that the first part of the journey, 10 miles, is country lanes and pretty fast country lanes as well, travelling around 50 miles an hour, but interestingly only lost 5 miles of range, so really quite impressed by that. That's pretty cool. So journey completed. Yeah, expected that Motorway would be a little bit more of a challenge for range, so just out of interest, I think we've just done 48 miles in distance, but looking at the amount of charge that we've lost, we've actually lost 95 miles of range on the charge. Having said that, it's only come down by 2/3, so if you were to say that was 2/3, then it's interesting. Yeah, the range that we seem to have lost is half, and yet we're above half on the range meter, so actually I don't think we have in reality. So I think trying to judge range is going to be a little bit of an interesting challenge until we get used to it. So there you go, that's the first proper journey, and that's a mixture of country lanes and motorways. Okay, so here we are, we're back at home, and that's the end of the first proper decent sized trip. So I just thought I'd give a recap on distance, mileage, and how much charge it's supposedly used. So just looking at it, it's 266 miles, so less than 178 we did earlier, so that's 88 miles round trip. When we started, it said we've got 190 miles of charge. It now says we've only got 50, so that's 140 miles of supposed range it's used to do an 88 mile round trip. Suppose that could have a lot to do with the fact that most of it's been motorway driving and much faster. But the interesting thing is there's 50 odd miles of range, and yet it only looks as though it's used 2/3 of the range on the dial. So if you were to work it on that basis, that would be 150 miles of range in total. So there you go. And interestingly, I suppose the other thing to look at is how many fuel cells have been used. And you can see there, out of the 8 cells, each still got 3 left. So again, that's, you know, less than not quite 2/3 gone. So yeah, interesting seeing the range thing. I think although it looks like we've used 140 miles of range just to do 88 miles, actually I think it's probably not that bad actually. I'm not quite sure about the range meter. I think more research needs to be done, more testing, but there you go. I thought I'd give you that idea, and so I think that's because the bulk of it, especially the trip back, I did pretty much all dual carriageway, so maxing out, you know, averaging out about 60 to 70 miles an hour all the way home. Anyways, that's how you go. Okay, so I've had a couple of days to think about the data that we collected on the videos that you've just seen, and also had a chance to get my mind around the numbers a little bit. I obviously failed massively on the mental arithmetic when I was sitting in the car straight after recording it. So I suppose let's just summarise. So the first thing is we started off with 190 miles of range, and we did about 10 miles, and we'd only used about 5 miles of the range to get there, using country lanes. Now, I'm sort of finding similar sort of things as I'm tootling around town, popping into Lichfield and driving around locally. So I think the 190 miles of range is probably pretty accurate for city driving, local commuting type driving, those sorts of things. The motorway journey and the dual carriageway obviously used a lot more energy, and probably the best way to summarise that, I think, is to look at the end of the journey. We had 50 miles of range and about 1/3 of range left in the car. So if we were to multiply that by 3, you're looking at probably around 150 miles of range there. Now I think we can probably knock a little bit off that as well, because obviously there was getting to and from the dual carriageways where we recover a bit more on the range side. So maybe we're looking at 140 miles of range on dual carriageway motorway, between 60 and 70 miles an hour, that sort of thing. Obviously weather conditions, colder weather, and also driving at higher speeds will have an impact on that as well. But I think sort of that sort of driving, we're probably talking about 140 miles of motorway range. So that sort of really is probably where we're at. Obviously if things change going forward and we get more information, I'll pass that on in future videos. So there's a couple of other things I'd like to do going forward. The first is I want to revisit the fast charging at a public charger. So again, we'll have another go at that. We'll try and find one that works this time and see how that goes. And then the other thing I'd like to do is to report back on how much it's costing to charge the car using cheap energy rates. And now in previous videos I've mentioned that we're switching to the Octopus Go tariff. We've had an email confirmation today to say that's ready to go. Just got a little bit of a glitch trying to switch over, but once that's done, then we'll actually charge the car during the early hours of the morning on cheap energy, and we'll report back on how that goes. So if you've got an electric car and you're interested in that tariff, search for Octopus Go online. It'll tell you all about it. It's 5p a kilowatt hour from 12:30 till 4:30 in the morning, and then reasonably good prices on electric throughout the rest of the day. If you are switching, I'll put my referral code into the video below, because that means we share £50 each. A friend of mine gave me his referral code, and that £50 has already gone into my Octopus account, so that's 50 quid off me electricity bill, which is good news. Likewise, you guys could do the same if you use my referral code. So on that, we'll wrap it up for this session, and speak to you on the next one. Obviously subscribe if you want notifications on future videos, and other than that, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.